shortly about how many people are being referred to the government's anti-radicalisation programme, Prevent. In fact, I think I've just got the figures right now, and it is telling me that thousands of children and teenagers have been flagged up to the government's anti-radicalisation programme. These are official figures just in from the Home Office. The first detailed figures of Prevent, in fact, reveal that 2,127 of those referred to the scheme in 2015-16 were under 15, including more than 500 girls. Another 2,000 were aged between 15 and 20. Goodness, I'm going to say that again. A first detailed Home Office analysis of Prevent reveals that 2,000 of those referred to Prevent in 2015-16 were under 15, including more than 500 girls. The scheme is part of the counter-terror strategy created by the Labour government back in 2003 to support those at risk of joining extremist groups, including far-right and radical Islamist groups. It tries to strengthen relationships between the police and other organisations, and it requires senior community figures like teachers, doctors, faith leaders to report any suspicions. Those in favour say it helps people who might be drawn into that radicalised world. Critics claim it creates so much distrust, which can leave those who are at risk even more isolated. Let's speak now to two people who work at the more extreme end of the Prevent strategy, known as Channel. Nigel Bromage is a former far-right extremist, and Rashad Ali is a counter-extremism specialist. Both provide support to individuals who are seriously at risk of radicalisation. Let me ask you both, first of all, about these figures then. Just over 2,000 of those referred to Prevent in 2015-16 were under the age of 15, including more than 500 girls.
Yeah, I think that's the referrals, which is actually people that are considered to be, there's a concern amongst frontline staff. The actual number of people that go on to an engaged kind of channel intervention as such is probably around about a quarter of that.
OK. But what do you think of that number of referrals?
I think I'm not entirely sure to what extent is that really picking up all the issues that we're dealing with, because we're talking about individuals who are expressing an interest towards extremist ideologies which have a tendency towards violent extremist ideologies. These on the far right and on the Islamist side. And actually, I think to some extent what you're seeing is some people who have concerns, which the majority of those concerns then are laid at the initial stage by saying, well, actually, no, there's nothing here to be concerned about. And then there's a small number of people that I think, you know, actually, when you break it down to maybe 150 young girls across the country, it's not a large problem, but it's significant enough to understand why it's necessary to have some type of engagement for them.
Understood. And thank you for that context, because it is important. Nigel, how do you react to these figures?
At the end of the day, for me, it's about, you know, the more people that are reported, the more people that we can engage with them. You know, if we can engage with people. So
you see these figures as a good thing, the fact that there's so many under 15s being referred? I
don't see it, you know, obviously, you know, I'd like it a lot less than that. Right. But for me, you know, if there is people who need support, then, you know, I'd rather us be aware of them so we can get involved with and try and support these people.
Nigel, you spent nearly 20 years as a far-right extremist, including joining Combat 18 for 5 years, openly racist, openly pro-Nazi. Were you groomed to join such groups?
Very much so. I mean, I initially joined the far-right because I was anti-IRA and I was anti-terrorist. It wasn't that I was racist or was anti-black or Asian. You know, I had black and Asian friends. I used to listen to reggae music. But for me, the hook was about being anti-IRA and anti-terrorist.
But it evolved from there?
Yeah, it evolved from there. I was groomed through a very slow process where they listened to my own home concerns, my own home issues.
Would you have described yourself as a vulnerable teenager?
Yeah, at the time. My mum was dying of cancer. The far-right moved in. They took her to hospital. They made sure they bought the shopping when we needed it. And it was a very gradual process. You know, they're very good at what we do, and we've got to try and counter that.
And is it fair to say that the threat of radicalisation in this country is as much about far-right extremism as Islamist extremism?
I wouldn't say it's as much, no, but it is a growing problem as, you know, as more people get angry about various issues.
Like what? What would attract you to Combat 18 now?
People have been really upset about things like the Manchester bomb attack. You know, that made people angry. The far right, you know, wasted no time. They tried to manipulate that. I mean, thankfully, the people of Manchester set them packing. You know, there was no room for extremism at that time. But the far right do try and manipulate, you know, issues and concerns that people have.
Rashad, your official title is a channel intervention provider. What does that mean in practical terms? Give our audience some insight into how you engage with radicalised individuals and try to de-radicalise them.
So I think that you have a number of people who, as Nigel mentioned, who will be expressing sentiments. Some of them are perfectly normal, perfectly understandable, which are anger towards what's happening in the world that they see around them. Some of them may have very personal negative experiences, whether it's Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hate crime, or some of them may well just have a worldview which tells them that there's a global war against Islam and Muslims, and therefore they're fighting at the front edge of that war. And so many of these young people, or even slightly older people, will then be taken on board by extreme ideologies and extremist groups. Some of them will try to go and join ISIS, some of them returning back from conflict zones, whether it's Somalia or Syria and Iraq. Some of them may well have been arrested for minor offences. And so those individuals, it's easier to engage with them so that they can understand that, yes, the anger is normal, but they can also understand how they're being manipulated by these ideas and by these groups, and then allow them a means by which they can reconcile with themselves.
OK, so what do you do? Talk to them?
Well, one of the ways, obviously, is to be able to get them to talk and get them to explain where their perspective is. Another means is getting them to reflect on what they're thinking about. Often they have a certain set of assumptions, both about politics and religion, which are quite dangerous. And so getting them to realise that, their political worldview is quite immature, but also maybe sometimes getting them to realise their emotions are in conflict with their religious sensibilities, actually.
OK. As you know, some people feel it unfairly targets Muslims, this de-radicalisation programme. Here are some students that our reporter Divya Talwar spoke to last year.
There is a real sense of fear and suspicion and sort of questioning of where the academic freedoms come in, where the student freedoms come in. So on campuses, we've got people self-censoring in classrooms. We've got, you know, students worried about what websites they can go on, students worried about what they can study, cutting things out of their dissertations because they're scared. And it's really curtailing the freedom of someone who, you know, wants to come to university and wants to study things, and that's the whole point, right?
There have been occasions where I have been sort of afraid to, you know, put my head above the parapet and sort of give my opinion on certain things at the risk of sort of being treated as an outcast, or treated as, you know, someone that may be suspected of being at risk of radicalisation. You know, I mean, when I've been searching for certain things, some of my friends have been saying to me, be careful, you know, use incognito, because, you know, if the university sort of monitor what you're doing, then that puts you in a very sort of precarious, vulnerable position where, you know, your freedoms may be curtailed, and where, you know, it'll basically be like sort of the thought police.
Do you think that there's a sense of paranoia, oversensitivity on this issue?
I don't think there is a paranoia or oversensitivity, because I personally know of people who's been referred to Prevent, and over a simple aspect of they were in a debate based on theological and religious, and this was organised by the Sixth Form Debating Society. And because they had their own religious beliefs, which I personally believe I share similar practice of Islam to them, and for them to be referred to the Prevent officer and then get searched up the whole house, his computer, his phones, everything, I don't think there's oversensitivity. I should be cautious because this happened to my friend, so it could happen to me.
The students I met at Brunel were all familiar with this man's story and used it as an example of why they were on edge with a Prevent strategy on campus. Mohammed is 33. Until last year, he was studying a master's at Staffordshire University in terrorism. He was reading this book on terrorism studies in the campus library, part of the course reading list, when he was questioned by a member of staff.
Do you support ISIS? Do you dislike homosexuality? Do you think that the three girls who left Bethnal Green in order to join ISIS, what do you think of this? And the questions became progressively intrusive. I was reading this very page in the book, which is about the definition.
Well, the staff member was concerned after the conversation, and under the Prevent duty wanted to flag it up. Security on campus were asked for Mohammed's details. Once he found out what was going on, he launched his own complaint against the university and hired a lawyer. Do you think that there was anything that you said that gave the member of staff reason for concern, and rightly so, she then went and investigated further?
No, there was no I think or I believe. It was purely so-and-so said, or it's been said and narrated in such a work. So it was, I followed the academic code to some, well, to the exact level, but unfortunately that did me no favours.
Mohammed's studies were put on hold while the university launched an investigation. They apologised, but he's decided not to go back.
Is that an example of the strategy working or not working?
I don't think that's any of those are really examples of strategy at all. So the first incident where the girl is complaining about somebody being searched and their property being looked at and their computer has nothing whatsoever to do with Prevent. It's actually an investigation that's taken place, which is actually another completely different part of the counter-terrorism strategy, which is pursue. So obviously there's been some kind of terrorism connection there. I don't know what the details are, but that's got nothing to do with Prevent. The second case with the individual who said that, you know, we can't comment obviously on the details, but obviously that's nothing to do with the Prevent referral. This is a staff member speaking and engaging with the individual, and obviously the university have, you know, admitted their errors in that case. I don't think that's to do with the referral process or even prevention. I think a lot of the time some of the issues that are raised are very genuine issues, but a lot of the time they come into a political context where people have a view regarding what Prevent is, or they're part of the ideological battle where they sit on certain sides of the political spectrum, whether it's on the hard left or the Islamist right, who see Prevent as being curtailing their ideological kind of belief system.
Okay. I've got a comment here from the National Police Chiefs Council, their lead for Prevent, a guy called Chief Constable Simon Cole. This is what he says about the figures. These figures out this morning demonstrate that trust and support in Prevent is growing. Each of these 7,631 referrals was someone trying to guide a person they had concerns about away from harm and towards the help they may have needed. Now, that's his very positive spin on these figures. You can see, Nigel, can you, that some might say, hang on, this is people overreacting.
The thing is, the more people that are aware, you know, Prevent is simply about protecting vulnerable adults and children. You know, if you know that is the baseline of it, and we've got to get down and we've got to deal with that. So the more reports there is, for me, the way I look at it, it's more people being helped.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on the programme. Still to come, more reaction to Priti Patel's resignation and what Theresa May needs to do to get a grip of the situation.